Hi and welcome to the new video. Today you will learn everything there is about the contagious Trickster setup. The Blight of Contagion is a channeling spell that can apply up to 5 layers of damaging chaos debuff on the enemy. As the name suggests, this transfigured version can interact with the Contagion spell, which has the unique property of spreading to nearby enemies when the affected target dies, carrying over other effects. Compared to regular Blight, it has a lower damage ceiling, but it's much easier to use as it reaches its full potential faster, and you don't need to worry about mana sustain, cast speed, or additional duration. On the other hand, it is stronger than the progenitor of the Contagion playstyle, the Essence Drain. The Blight deals spell damage and it is not an ailment. Thus you can improve its DPS via Pain Attunement Keystone, and spell-related bonuses such as Zealotry, Aura, or modifiers on your gear. It doesn't actually hit, so it can't inflict poisons or leech life for you, but it also can't be blocked by proximity shields. The Trickster Ascendancy offers amazing sustain and defensive bonuses, while also granting you a decent amount of damage and utility. You could also opt for the Occultist Ascendancy to get more damage or explosions, but it's not really recommended, as the lost survivability outweighs those gains. The Blight of Contagion lasts for over 5 seconds, so you don't need to continuously channel the entire time. To boost your damage, you should apply Withering Debuff and Despair Curse, which will drastically increase the chaos damage taken by affected enemies. It is a hybrid build with tons of evasion rating, easily capped ailment, avoidance, and spell suppression, and a great recovery. Half of the incoming damage will ignore your energy shield, allowing you to replenish both resources at once. Additionally, the Petrified Blood will slow down incoming damage from hits. The main selling point of this build is the amazing clear speed and satisfying visuals. Your Contagion will often reach enemies that you cannot even see yet. Unfortunately, most non-poison chaos dot builds are currently underperforming. It will be hard to achieve more than 5 million DPS, although it is enough for non-Uber content. As a consequence of the previous point, you should have at least 30 Divine Orbs before attempting this build for the best experience. This archetype simply depends on good items and cluster jewels for scaling. There are no mandatory unique items for their functionality, but most of them are quite useful to have. The jewels can be expensive depending on their modifiers, but even the cheaper variants are usually very good and worth their price. Thanks to the mana reduction from this helmet, you will be able to cast your Divine Blessing almost for free. It also grants you plenty of evasion, energy shield, and chaos resistance. The Cane of Kulamak is a very special unique that can grant you tons of damage, but getting the correct one can be very problematic due to its randomized nature. Remember that you can use spell damage modifiers, which are usually much cheaper than the pure chaos damage options. The Replica Dragon Fang's Flight improves the gem levels of your Blight spell and grants you plenty of reservation efficiency. It also provides a bit of elemental resistance and lowers your attribute requirements. Blight is an unpopular skill, so it should be rather cheap. Replica Soul Tether grants you the Corrupted Soul Keystone, which provides you with an extra energy shield based on your maximum life, and splits incoming damage into energy shield and life. Try to get a useful Corrupted Implicit, as the original is rather wasteful. The Ancestral Vision grants you tons of elemental ailment avoidance. If you can't get enough of this modifier on your boots to reach 100% chance, you can overcap your spell suppression instead. Doubling the effect of the 2 most important modifiers on your non-unique jewels is more powerful than getting 4 regular modifiers, but the difference is not that groundbreaking. Specific roles are quite valuable, but you can start low and upgrade them over time. Using more unique jewels also diminishes the results of this jewel. You can use the Forbidden Jewels to borrow very powerful notables from other Shadows Ascendancies, but it can be very expensive. The Born in the Shadows elevates your defense even further, while the Opportunistic offers both damage and survivability depending on the situation. There is only one offensive modifier applicable here, and it can be quite expensive. However, there are plenty of useful and powerful defensive modifiers available for you. Brutal Restraint doesn't offer any meaningful damage bonuses, but can greatly improve your clear speed by improving your Flask sustain or generating frenzy charges and onslaught buff on kill. To improve your damage, you shall seek bonuses to gem levels, chaos spell damage, and regular or chaos damage over time multiplier. For defenses, you will need bonuses to maximum life and energy shield, cover elemental resistances, and shift some of the physical damage to be taken as elemental. Your weapon is the biggest source of increases to your spell damage, chaos damage over time multiplier, and extra gem levels for your chaos spells. Dual wielding wands can offer more damage, but similar stuff might be cheaper. As a trickster, you will gain an extra energy shield based on the evasion rating on your body armor. It should also grant you other usual defensive modifiers, such as resistance or physical damage mitigation. On your boots, seek maximum life, high movement speed, and resistance. If you can't get at least a 50% ailment avoidance chance here, you should get additional spell suppression for the Ancestral Vision Jewel. Thanks to the one step ahead notable, you will always have at least 108% action speed, so you don't need such modifiers here. Your gloves are a purely defensive piece, but you can still get plenty of damage via Eldritch Implicits. Remember to use an evasion base to get the bonus spell suppression from your evasion mastery. On your ring, you can get tons of life and lacking attributes or resistances. To boost your damage, try to get chaos damage, damage over time multiplier, or additional minimum frenzy charges. If you struggle with mana costs, you can improve your regeneration rate or lower the mana costs by a flat amount. You can also opt for the life recoup to improve your sustain. On your rare jewels, look for maximum life and energy shield, chaos damage over time multiplier, spell damage and cover lacking resistances and attributes. The Blight is an area spell, but the debuff it applies doesn't deal area damage, so avoid that modifier. The maximum life and chaos damage over time multiplier is significantly more valuable than any other modifier on your jewels. You can use the Adorned Jewel to bolster those two specific modifiers even more, but they have to be of magic quality and successfully corrupted. There are only 3 good modifiers available here. You could also use the Unspeakable Gifts Notable for additional explosions, but it tends to ruin your contagion chaining, so it is not always worth it. There are many useful notables on medium chaos related jewels. The Flow of Life is recommended as it boosts both your damage and survivability, but you can opt for pure damage instead. You can also use one channeling jewel to generate endurance charges. The Taste of Hate is a very good defensive flask that grants you the very needed physical damage mitigation by shifting part of it to be taken as cold damage instead. You can use this flask to automatically apply Despair Curse to all nearby enemies. It will boost your clear speed, but you will still need to manually use Despair against bosses. Thanks to the Trickster Ascendancy, you are immune to the Petrified effect, making it a very strong defensive flask. You need to use the Enkindling Orb to negate the duration penalty. Keep in mind that you won't be able to automate it with the Instilling Orb. For your remaining magic flasks, we recommend using a Life Flask with Bleeding Removal, Quartz Flask with an Evasion rating bonus, and the Quicksilver Flask with bonus movement speed or curse effect reduction. Blight of Contagion is a channeling spell that applies 5 layers of damaging chaos debuff on enemies. The debuff can be spread via Contagion. If you are using wands, it might be more efficient to use the efficacy instead of the empower support. The infusion buff not only improves your damage, but also protects you from incoming chaos damage. Contagion applies a debuff in the targeted area that deals chaos damage and spreads to other enemies when the main target dies, carrying over the Blight debuff as well. The damage of Contagion is irrelevant. For the best results, you should increase its radius to the maximum, including raising the base radius with the enhanced support. You can also use the faster casting support to make it smoother. The Grace is your main defensive aura that grants you a lot of evasion rating and helps scaling it further. The Zealotry greatly improves your spell damage. You can also use the purity of elements to ease your gearing process, but it is redundant at later stages. The Petrified Blood splits a portion of the incoming hit damage into damage over time effect. It also enables the Pain Attunement Keystone for 30% more damage. You will need the Enlightened support and anoint the Charisma notable to significantly reduce the mana reservation cost of those auras. The Vitality is a defensive aura that improves your life regeneration. It reserves a flat amount of mana instead of the usual percentage. The Clarity is a very similar aura, but it improves your mana regeneration instead, which is important for your sustain. The Defiance banner improves your evasion rating and lowers the critical strike chance of nearby enemies. With the Arrogance support, those auras will reserve life instead of mana. Due to the Petrified Blood effect, you can freely reserve the upper half of your life. The Malevolence is an offensive aura that greatly improves your damage. You can swap it with the Zealotry for a lesser burst, but higher comfort. The Divine Blessing improves the effectiveness of the supported aura and turns it into a temporary buff. Thanks to the Vertex Helmet and the Inspiration support, you will be able to cast it for a very little mana cost. The Despair is your main curse skill that greatly lowers the chaos resistance of affected enemies, which massively improves your damage. As damage over time effects cannot penetrate resistances. The Frostblink is an instantaneous teleport that leaves chilling ground in both locations. You can also use the Flame Dash instead. The Withering Step is your only source of the Withering debuff, which increases the damage taken by enemies. You can optionally link it with the Enhanced support to apply more stacks at once, or the increased duration support to make them last longer. It is best to kill all the bandits and be rewarded with 2 additional passive skill tree points by Eramir. At first you can use the Soul of Brine King to get freeze immunity, but later on you should switch for the Soul of Arakali, which grants you better protection against damage over time effects. As the minor Pantheon power, you can use the Soul of Rislather, which will always boost the effect of your life flask, and lower the regeneration rate of enemies you hit with the Frostblink. The leveling is very easy. You can start using the Blight of Contagion right from the start, and you can use the regular Blight just fine. As a shadow, you will have many useful damage notables in close proximity, so you should grab them to make your leveling even faster and replace them with cluster jewels later on. It is a spell skill, so it scales exceptionally well with sources of additional gem levels. For more tips and an adjusted leveling tree, check out our written guide on the website. On the final passive tree, you'll pick up a lot of spell suppression chance, bonuses to maximum life and energy shield, bolster your auras, and increase the area of your contagion. You will also pick up 2 important keystones. The Polymath is a signature trickster notable that improves your damage and sustain based on the amount of different masteries. The chaos damage notables on the passive tree are rather inefficient, so you should source your damage modifiers from the jewels instead. We encourage you to give this build a try. It is a very fun and unique playstyle. If you want to see more of our work, consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. Have a good day and see you next time.